Are the Pelicans' injuries just bad luck, or is there something more to what's going on here? And what's the most positive thing this season for the Pelicans so far? Will Guillory of The Athletic joins me to answer those questions and more in a Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Friday, and I'm joined by an even greater credential member of the media and Pelicans Insider, Will Guillory of The Athletic, at Will Guillory. Well, what's going on, my man?
Man, it feels good to be back. Our first show of the year. And boy, we couldn't pick a better time to do it, right?
Seriously. What's more fun than a back-to-back losses of 41 points and 28 points? But look, there are some bright spots. We'll get into those, but we're going to have to talk about all the injuries and everything first, because I think you can shed some insight a little bit too on what's going on for a lot of people. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. Those generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. So I tweeted this out after the Cleveland game, Will, that the Pelicans, when they're missing their literal top 8 rotation players, which, let's start there. You ever seen anything like that, like at all?
Never. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying what Memphis dealt with last year was really bad, but I think, during stretches, they still had, Jaren Jackson, they still had Santi Aldama, like they had like real NBA players out there. Like we were watching again the other night, literally the Pelicans had all 3 two-way guys on the court, plus a rookie, plus a dude that they just signed like a couple weeks ago off the street. And that was like the lineup that they had on the court. I mean, it's just been crazy trying to figure out, who they're playing from night to night, seeing Willie Green try to figure out his rotations. It's just crazy.
It truthfully is. I looked at the math. They were without $160 million in salary against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Of the guys that are playing, if you don't count the 3 two-way guys who all got significant run out there, it's like $12 million in salary playing in an NBA game. The Pelicans' total salary is like $173. To like put that in that context is like, yeah, the expectation should not be winning games, and it should probably just be keeping the score within 20 points, it feels like right now.
Yeah, it's basically like when you see those stats where the Yankees are playing the Tigers in the playoff series, and like one Yankees player equals the entire Tigers payroll. Like it's basically like what the Pels are doing in these last couple of games, where they're playing a whole bunch of dudes who wouldn't even get rotation minutes with Cleveland, and those guys are playing 40 minutes trying to beat Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen. It's wild.
No, and I think we'll look at that in the next segment. We kind of look at the fight and how at times the team has been competitive. But staying with the injuries here, like how do you view it? Do you view this as just like pure bad luck? Is there something else kind of going on with the medical staff? What do you think is kind of going on with like just crippling, debilitating injuries this team is dealing with?
Yeah, I think anytime you talk about when it's a problem this huge, it's never just one answer, right? Some of it is, of course, just bad luck. Like DeJounte Murray, broken thumb, bad luck. A guy falls on Herb Jones' shoulder, clearly bad luck. But I do think, in particular, the guy we got to talk about here is Zion Williamson, right? With the repeated hamstring injuries, I think that's something where you can't just say that's bad luck. That's something we've seen him deal with before. Literally, the same hamstring was the reason he missed last year's playoffs. He had the great start in 22-23, missed the rest of that season due to the other hamstring. So I think we can definitely have a conversation about, what's the root cause of some of this. I think, we've seen Zion during this season, and you can see that he's lost weight. He's clearly in better shape. So I think a lot of the conversation is, well, Zion said all of this stuff during the summer, and clearly he's not right. I don't think that's the issue, but I do think there needs to be a conversation about what he's doing to maintain his body day to day. How much focus is he putting into making sure he's right? And also, what extra measures is he putting in to make sure that this stuff doesn't become an issue over and over again? I think you can say, well, I'm losing weight. Well, I'm getting in better shape. But we've seen with other stars in the league, sometimes you got to go above and beyond to resolve some of these issues that keep popping up. I think one a lot of people have pointed to is Stephen Curry with the ankles early in his career, where he figured out, hey, I got to do more stuff to make sure my ankles are right because my ankles just aren't like other guys. I've injured them so often, and it's a repetitive issue, so you've got to do more. And I think with Zion, I think the step last summer was, okay, I'm going to get my body right. I'm going to get my mind right. I'm going to come in ready to play. And I think the focus now needs to be, I need to figure out what I have to do to make sure these injuries don't keep popping up over and over again. I think that's what Zion needs to answer going forward.
Yeah, right. Like you spent some time with him over the summer and you wrote about it in The Athletic. And truthfully, it does seem like he did a lot of the right things. And that's what's so unfortunate about this. It feels like that he did a lot of the correct things. And then even still, this injury has happened, right? And I think that's kind of the biggest looming question, that even if he does a lot of the correct things, maybe it's not everything. And I agree with you. And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the show of like, if this doesn't send a message to him that like, you've just got to go like to the ends of the earth to try and solve it, I don't know what will. You know, at what point, if you're the Pelicans, are you like, I don't know if we can keep doing this at this point?
It's certainly not that far away. I'm telling you, when we're going in the potential of year 7 next year with 0 playoff games, I mean, that's definitely something that's looming as a very real possibility. The guy has got a max contract, and he's going into year 7 with 0 playoff games. I think that's a real conversation you got to have. I think, I kind of go back to the same conversation I had a lot of times last summer where everybody was so ready to get rid of Brandon Ingram. And I was saying, hey, the worst time to trade a guy is when his value is at an all-time low. And I think right now that's the conversation we're having about Zion Williamson. Sure, it's very easy to get on Twitter and say, hey, trade this guy. He's not healthy. It ain't worth the trouble. But then when you actually make those phone calls around the league, what do those offers actually look like? What do people actually want to give up to get a Zion Williamson in their building? I think that's part of the conversation, just like last year where everybody was like, hey, the financial stuff, it doesn't make sense. Let's just pay Trey Murphy and give him that starting money. All right, well, what happens when teams are offering you like the backup center and a second-round pick for a dude you got on the max contract? Are you willing to pull the trigger on that deal? Probably not. So I think that's the stuff you got to get into. And I think, again, Zion, as of now, it's always a caveat you got to throw. As of now, we're expecting to see Zion come back from this injury at some point during the season. So I think that's part of this conversation. What does he look like when he comes back? Can he remain healthy when he's back? How good is he when he's back? How good is this team when he comes back? So I think that's part of the conversation here is like, yeah, you got to consider all possibilities moving forward, even the possibility of moving forward without Zion. But also, you got to factor in the rest of the season and what it looks like. Can he come back healthy? And if he does, what does this team look like? Because the craziest thing about all of this, Jake, is like all of the talk last summer was we've got to make change. We want this team to look different. We're bringing in DeJounte Murray so we can have a real point guard. We can put everybody into their right position. And including preseason, they've literally played 0 minutes with DeJounte Murray, Zion Williamson, and Brandon Ingram. We're about to be at Thanksgiving, and those dudes haven't spent a single second on the court together, which is crazy. And that's what the whole season was supposed to be about, evaluating what it looks like with those 3 guys.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You say when Zion returns, and we don't know when that'll be. And it seems like it's going to be a couple more weeks at the earliest with it. And while they're going to get guys like CJ McCollum back, Herb Jones back, Jordan Hawkins back, and DeJounte Murray back. That list is like so long, it takes a second to try and remember everybody here. Zion's kind of the guy that we think will make the team go. Given where they are right now, with basically like the second worst record in the Western Conference, at what point do you switch to this being a lost season and tank and shut people down and focus on this upcoming draft, which is significantly better than, say, last year's draft?
No, I think you have to make that decision based on what it looks like in the next couple of weeks. I've written this a few times recently. I think this is where they go into crunch time with this season because, in particular, like you said, these guys are going to start coming back now. So you're going to see it's not going to be the full team, but you're going to have CJ, you're going to have Hawk, you're going to have DeJounte relatively soon. Herb Jones is going to be coming back soon. So I think it's basically going to be 2 phases, right? You're going to have this team with everybody but Zion and Jose. and it's going to be that for a while. And I think you need to see what that team looks like. How many wins can they get to? Because we really don't know when Zion's going to come back. But if that team with DeJounte, CJ, Herb, Trey, Bi, if they can start stringing together some wins, then you can convince yourself maybe they can catch up. Maybe a Sacramento or a Dallas or whoever in the West falls back. We can make up some ground. But I think that's the key is going to be how good is that team with DeJounte, Trey, with Bi. Is that team good enough to make up some ground? And if not, then you got to start making some tough decisions coming out into the new year.
Yeah, and it being a lost season would feel weird. It's not like Memphis where you'll just run it back and you add a top draft pick. It would be some pieces are going to be gone, and you're not going to ever really get to know what this team was going to be capable of, whether that's Ingram, whether it's Zion, or what have you. Some of those guys aren't going to be here next year, given that this team is still in the luxury tax currently, and that bill's getting higher by the day, first with Jalen Noel and now with Elfrid Payton. We'll talk Payton in a second here. So coming up next, let's look at some of the bright spots for the team. I want to get into Willie Green a little bit as well, and we're going to have some fun in the third segment of today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. That's all coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Chime. Look, one of the most important things you can do is just taking control of your finances, not getting nickel and dimed all the time, saving that money and using it for important things. So we've all hit a point where we realized it was time to make serious money moves. So take control of your finances by using a Chime checking account with features like no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. And you can learn more over at chime.com. Chime helps you make progress with fee-free overdraft up to $200. Your next deposit is just applied to the balance. So get spotted on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals. And all you need to do to set it up, just set up direct deposit in your Chime account. And after a qualifying direct deposit of $200 or more, Chime will notify you to enroll in SpotMe. With an activated debit card, Chime will spot you up to $200 when you exceed your balance, and your next direct deposit is applied to your negative balance. And Chime never charges fees or interest for using SpotMe. So make all your fall finances a little greener by working towards your financial goals with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Chime feels like progress. Banking service provided and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank NA or Stride Bank NA, members FDIC. SpotMe eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Boosts are available to eligible Chime customers enrolled in SpotMe and are subject to monthly limits. Terms and conditions apply. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by my go-to ticketing app, Game Time. I love Game Time because it has tons of features, and with all of those features, it's easy to watch the Pelicans or the Saints or other live events even easier. Now, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And they have the all-in pricing. I toggle this up front. You can too. When you do it, it's going to show you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And if you're going to a venue you haven't been to before, they have a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And then there's always the lowest price guarantee, meaning it's the best time to buy on Game Time. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. And thank you for making the Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Here with Will Guillory of The Athletic. But by the way, go to LockedOnDaily.com. Sign up for the daily, completely free, all new Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter. Just click on the Locked On Pelicans logo, put your email, and you'll get an article from me, some national coverage as well in there every single day. Fantasy basketball coverage from the GOAT, Josh Lloyd. Okay, let's pivot a little bit away from some of the injuries for a minute, Will, because yeah, it's sad. And there's just nothing they can do until they get some of these guys back. But I think there've been some bright spots for the team that maybe wouldn't have emerged otherwise. And I think a big one is Yves Missi. You wrote about him the other day over at The Athletic, and I agree with kind of your premise on this of like, he's going to be the starter going forward. For all that talk about small ball this offseason, it seems like Yves Missi is going to be the starting center as long as he's healthy, and cross our fingers on that. The rest of the way, like, kind of screw small ball, they found the starting center they were looking for.
Yeah, and I think the happiest person about all that is Willie Green, right? Because Willie Green was willing to go small, but we know Willie. He wants to play defense, and he wants to be big, and he wants to be more versatile defensively. And I think when people hear versatile, they say, "Well, switch everything." And I think it's not about being able to switch everything; it's about being able to play all coverages, right? And I think that's what Yves Missi brings in his peak form. I think, of course, he's got a lot of room to grow. He's still got a lot of lessons to learn. We saw him learn a big one the other night when he got switched on to LeBron James.
Yeah.
And LeBron dropped the three in his face to basically win the game. That's a lesson you want him to learn along the way, is how to deal with that situation. And the best way to learn that situation is to be thrown in the fire. And I think, like you said, that's one of the few good things that we've gotten out of these last few weeks, is being able to see Yves Missi thrown in the fire, having some really good moments, having some really bad moments. I think I tweeted out during that Dallas game, my man looked completely lost on a couple
yeah,
of those.
they were picking on him with those switches, and they were kind of like wanting that matchup and wanting him on Luka, wanting him on Kyrie, and then they were just shooting over the top of him, which was kind of the funniest thing to me with all of that. You mentioned the switching scheme on that. That's kind of been their defense for the past couple of years. It's led them to consecutive top 6, top 7, depending on where you're looking, defensive ratings. It's fallen off a cliff this year, to put it mildly. Is that just missing Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray? Is there more to it than that?
Yeah, and I would say it's not just missing Herb Jones, because once you lost Herb Jones, you no longer have Herb Jones, Dyson Daniels, or Najee Marshall. And I think those are the guys who a lot of the Pels people would turn to and say, we're good defensively because we are able to have somebody on ball at all times who can make a difference, right? And you see what Dyson Daniels is doing out there in Atlanta.
Yeah, he looks good.
We know Najee Marshall is a pest on the ball, and we know Herb Jones first team all defense. So when you take all three of those guys out of the equation, along with DeJounte Murray, and then you insert into the equation of Jalen Noel or Brandon Boston, a bunch of dudes who aren't used to playing 30 minutes a night, you're going to see breakdowns. You're going to see miscommunications. You're going to see guys not knowing how to play together. So I think once you start seeing these guys start getting back into the rotation, I think the defense will pick up. But I do think, like we're talking about here, there are going to be some ups and down nights when you got Yves Missi playing heavy minutes at the center. And I think we're going to have a lot of angry Pelicans fans tweeting, why is Jeremiah Robinson-Earl playing so many minutes? Why are they finishing games without Yves Missi on the floor? And I think that's part of the equation here. When you got a young guy, going through a few bumps, it's going to be ups and downs. Willie Green is going to have certain games where he's like, listen, I just rather go with a lineup that I can trust. And I know exactly what they're bringing to the table. But I do think ultimately, having Yves Missi there, having a center that you can build around going forward, and in particular, what we've talked about before, a center on a rookie contract.
Yeah, that's a big deal here.
It's a huge deal because you're paying all this money to Trey Murphy. You're paying all this money to Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray. Having a guy who you can trust in that spot, and he's also cost controlled for the next couple years, is extremely important. And I wouldn't be surprised if they go back to that next draft, try to find another center on the cheap, just because they know they're paying so much money for their perimeter players. And I think you're seeing that more and more around the league. You saw Portland go and draft Donovan Clingan. You saw a lot of these teams where they're saying, hey, we got these expensive centers. If you got an expensive center and he's not Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid or maybe Sabonis, Anthony Davis, like you're probably better off just going to get a cheap guy and spend all your money on the dudes who shoot threes, because that's where the value is in the NBA, is dudes who can score in transition, dudes who can score threes. So I think the Pelicans are trying to do that. But again, you got to keep healthy bodies on the court. But I do think there is a question, even when all of these guys come back, how much pressure are they putting on Herb Jones from a night-to-night basis to be Mr. Everything on defense? Of course, we know he's capable, but it's a lot to ask from him night to night, especially if you're closing some of these games small ball, if you're asking him to guard some of these point guards who he doesn't necessarily feel as comfortable against, versus him playing the wings where we know that's his best. So I think that's going to be a big question of once his kind of looks whole again, how much can they depend on Yves Missi, and how much can Herb Jones kind of lift everybody around him?
Look, let's just get him back on the court first. I think that's like the biggest first step to throw all the pressure on him there with everything. I'll just take that Let him have the pressure. That means he's playing here. What about a guy like Brandon Boston Jr.? I think he's definitely proven that he is an NBA rotation guy. I think he's playing kind of a role that's too big for him right now. In the past couple of games, you've seen him come back down to earth a little bit from some of that fast start. Maybe that's he's on the scouting report. Also, just lack of other offensive threats on this team. What have you seen from him? What do you see his like the ideal role for him being on this Pelicans team?
Yeah, I'll joke with a few different people, who work for the Pelicans, who I say, man, there's if you're an agent and you get a call from the Pelicans and they're offering your guy a two-way contract, you better
Take it.
sprint to the computer and sign it, because they've consistently generated guys in those two-way deals who are getting playing time, who are getting real money coming out of this situation. You see Najee Marshall, a former two-way guy, got basically a mid-level exception from the Dallas Mavericks last summer. So I think Brandon Boston is another example of them being able to find these guys, put them in the right position to succeed. And of course, it doesn't help when there are constant injuries, so you got to play guys at the end of the bench. But I think with Brandon Boston in particular, just his confidence on the offensive end is surprising for a dude who hasn't really done that much in the NBA. He's had some bright moments during his time with the Clippers, but this is a guy who the San Antonio Spurs at the end of the preseason this year was like, we're good.
It's like we don't need you.
It's like, and it's not like they got 5 all-star guards over there. They could certainly use some help on the offensive end, but they were just like, nah, he could just go. And the Pelicans are bringing him in and playing him heavy minutes. They're depending on him to score. And I think that the one thing he's going to love with some of these guys coming back, just to see what it looks like to have a catch-and-shoot jumper for Brandon Boston, because this is a whole lot of dribble,
a lot,
mid-range. And it's like, Brandon Boston can do that, but he's doing it way more than he should be. And I think once this thing looks like how it's supposed to be, where he could just spread the floor, shoot some corner threes, maybe now and then do a little something off the dribble, I think that's where you're going to see him really excel. And I think he's a guy who can really play that role well. I think, the high end, if he can start picking some things up defensively, I can see a guy like maybe DeAnthony Melton with the Golden State Warriors. So a guy in that mold where he's not necessarily making plays on the ball, but he's a guy who you can give minutes in your guard rotation. He can guard multiple positions. He can knock down those open threes. And that's what this Pelicans team needs, right? They want more volume three-point shooters. They want more guys who can spread the floor and make things easier for their stars.
You had to pick his NBA comp basically as a guy who's just now announced is out for the season. Like, Will, that's the most like appropriate thing.
That's my bad, y'all. That's my bad.
Just put some sort of voodoo on Brandon Boston Jr. there unintentionally and everything.
Let's go old school. Let's go maybe a George Hill. How about that?
I see that.
George Hill, that'll be a huge success for the Pelicans.
I said if you're looking for like a high-end comp from him, I see Kevin Martin a little bit in him, I think.
Before Kevin Martin makes me think about it. I miss ugly jumpers in the NBA, man. Remember the day when guys had ugly jumpers in the league? Everybody like goes to shooting school when they're like 8 years old now, and they all come in with their elbows tucked and their knees. Man, I want dudes who shoot it from the hip like Kevin Martin, or shoot it from over the top of the head like Tyreke Evans. Bring that back.
Like what? Sean Marion had a terrible looking one too, and everything. Like his was awful. Yeah, I don't know. Add some more like style, flair. We want kids emulating those guys, right? Look, they were all good players, so there's something to it.
Flair. I think that's what we talk about today in the NBA. Everything feels so monolithic. Everybody looks the same. They play the same. Let's get some individualism going in the NBA again.
Yeah, but let's also do it while the Pelicans are shooting a lot of threes, which all the other teams are doing too, right? Let's not go. Let's at least make that a requirement here for it. What about Brandon Ingram? Because I think he's done pretty well this season, and he seems to be trying to do and succeeding at doing like what the team wanted him to do. He's shooting more threes. I think the one real complaint I have about him is he's not getting to the rim as much as you'd like. That also could just be the lack of other offensive threats, and it's easy to take that away. What have you made of his season so far?
Yeah, I do think, like you mentioned, he's made progress in the areas you want to see with him when it comes to increasing his three-point volume. I think his passing year after year continues to get better. I think he's making more efforts on the defensive end. But I do think that, it's just a lot being asked of him night to night. playing against double, triple teams constantly. I think there are certain games where he's dealt with it really well, and I think there are certain games where it's just been overwhelming, and he's like turning the ball over 8 times and taking bad shots. And I think it's easy to criticize him, and I think he deserves criticism on the nights. But I think there's it's a human element where it just starts snowballing you at a certain point, where it's just like, man, I'm just dealing with so much. It's tough just to stay consistent in what I need to do every night to make this team successful, especially when you look at the scoreboard and you're down by 15 and they're sending double teams at you every single time. It's very easy just to fall back and make mistakes, make bad passes, and not do what you need to do. And I think that's the one complaint I would make about his season is just he needs more consistency. I think the games when he plays well, he's looked amazing. And when he's shooting the three, he's making good decisions off the double teams. He's not forcing things, but there are certain nights where he's got like 15 points. And it's just like, man, you want more. You want just more aggression. You want more of him being like, this is my team. We're going to make this happen. I'm going to drag these guys across the finish line. And there are just certain nights where that hasn't existed. But I think if you're looking forward to what this team is going to look like once everybody's back, I think him being a more high volume 3-point guy is major news. Not only
that's significant.
Not only for the season, but just his future, right? Just because
you got to shoot threes in the NBA right now. Like you just have to.
And a lot of these teams who were kind of turned off by the idea of Brandon Ingram, that was a huge reason why his reluctance to shoot the three ball. Where if you're Sacramento Kings, for example, if they knew Brandon Ingram was going to shoot the ball like this season, maybe they aren't so like, hey, we'll just take DeMar DeRozan. Maybe they're like, maybe we're more interested in the idea of a Brandon Ingram or a Golden State Warriors. Maybe they're more interested in the idea of a Brandon Ingram if he's a guy shooting 7, 8, 9 threes a game around 38%. So I think for his future, for him as a guy who's looking for a whole lot of money next summer, doing this is a big step in his career. But I think, again, with him, it's always about consistency. It's about his decision-making, and it's about when it's time to win. Is he doing the things necessary to win versus the things that come comfortable to him? And I think that's been the big question throughout his career. A lot of times he falls back on the things he feels comfortable with versus I got to do whatever it takes to win. And I think that's going to be the big question.
Look, and they're going to need that given the hole that they're in if they want to kind of climb the standings and get back into the playoff picture. Coming up next, I'm going to ask you about that. We're going to have a little fun. I got a couple of games that we're going to play here. And yes, there is an each one more question coming up here, which Will has specifically requested, but he doesn't exactly know what it is. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn a very liberal rate of 4.25 APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For specific product disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Comment down below if you're an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And your second listen today, Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson making sense of everything black and gold. Can Darren Rizzi keep the job? Is that even a good move? Do they need to just completely clean house? Ross Jackson's making sense of it all over at the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, before we get back actually into Pelican stuff, Darren Rizzi, I know you were thrilled about Dennis Allen getting fired. This is where you get to be a fan here, Will. Thoughts on Darren Rizzi so far?
Listen, he is my Lord and Savior, Darren Rizzi. if he like he has a seat open at my Thanksgiving table, whatever he needs, I'm here for Darren Rizzi. I'm here for the movement. I'm here for the clogged toilets. I'm loving it. Listen,
that was incredible. That was incredible.
It was such a great way to bring in your first win and tell everybody that's what you did on your first day on the job, which is incredible. But I'm at the top of the list of people I'm all for Tank for Shedeur, Tank for Cam Ward. But listen, it just feels good to feel good about your team again. It's just been such an ugly,
What's that like?
for the past couple years, and wanting your coach fired, wanting your GM fired, hating your quarterback. It's not a good place to be in. It's not fun on Sunday mornings to wake up and just be like, I hate everything about this team. So I'm just happy to feel good about my team on Sundays again. Even if it's ultimately bad for us to win these games, it just feels good to feel good about my team. So I'm all for Rizzy. Do I think he should be the coach next year? I don't know. If he wins a couple games, I wouldn't be mad at it. But I do think just get some positive vibes in the building is a good thing.
Yeah, they definitely needed that. All right, I got a couple of games that we play on Locked On NBA that we're going to adapt for Locked On Pelicans here with Will Guillory of The Athletic. Let's keep it with the coach. I didn't write this one down, but we talked about Darren Rizzi here. So we played a couple of games on Locked On NBA. There's real or fake, and then there's counted up. Let's start real or fake. You tell me if this is real or fake here. Willie Green's seat is not hot, but like simmering a little bit.
I think it's real in that, like I mentioned before, I think now I'm not judging them for how they've looked the past couple of weeks. Like you can quibble about the end of the Brooklyn game, the end of the Lakers game. There are times where he should take timeouts that he doesn't. There are times where his rotations are a little weird. That's whatever any coach. I think what needs to happen now is when they have relatively most of their lineup back, they need to look like a real competitive team. They need to win some games. And if it continues to slip with CJ out there, with Herb out there, with DeJounte out there, that's when the Willie Green conversations become really weird. I'm not judging them. Even losing in Dallas, of course, is terrible. But like, it is.
What are you supposed to do here with some of the roster that they have? Like, there really isn't much that they can do. All right, another real or fake kind of based off that, and you just wrote about that over at The Athletic too, so everyone should really check that one out. So Willie Green's longest winning streak that he's had as a head coach with New Orleans is 7 games coming 2 years ago. So real or fake? The Pelicans will win at least 8 games in a row this season.
Ooh, man, just based on history, I gotta go under, right? Because I think, not only because they haven't done it, but like I just feel like as good as it's going to feel to see some of these guys back in the lineups, you got to think like somebody's going to twist the ankle, like there's going to be a back-to-back, like it's just really hard to win those many games in a row, especially for a team that's not like considered like top 3 or 4 in the West. Like usually teams who win 8, 9, 10 games in a row, they're usually the best teams in the league. And I don't think like the Pelicans are going to be better, but I certainly wouldn't put them in that category. Like, do I think they can play like at a 50-win pace the rest of the way with these guys? Maybe. But I think winning 8, 9, 10 in a row, I think that's going to be really tough.
That 50-win pace is basically what it might take to kind of get back into at least the hunt for the 6th seed. They're within striking distance of the 10th seed here, but they've got to pass 4 teams. At 4-12, when we're recording this, 8 games gets you back to 500, right? If they went on an 8-game winning streak right now, they would be at 500, which is kind of telling on where the season is.
Congratulations, guys. You're back at 0 now.
Yeah, cool. New season. We've just started fresh here. That's kind of like what it would be. Okay, let's switch to count it up here. E'Twaun Moore is now a scout for the Chicago Bulls. He's been in New Orleans a bunch, so we've gotten to see him here. So count it up, Will. E'Twaun Moore is the blank small forward for the Pelicans all time. And we can go just since they were the Pelicans. We don't need to go back to the Hornets days unless you really want to do that.
Listen, I really don't want to confess how much research I've done on this particular topic. I've taken this extremely seriously. I'm coming in with notes.
Okay, serious face here.
And it's like takes. I've got all type of stuff for you. So I think the undoubtable number 1 on this list, I think we can all agree, has to be Brandon Ingram, right? Based on what he's done in the Pelicans uniform, he's what, top 5 in points, top 5 in assists. He just passed Peja Stojakovic for 2nd on the all-time 3-point list.
That's actually wild to think about.
Right, exactly. And he literally just did it in the Dallas game. Like a couple of nights ago, he just passed Peja Stojakovic for 2nd all-time in franchise history at 3-pointers, the guy who hates shooting threes. So I think just based on what he's done in the Pelicans uniform, he's gone to multiple playoffs. He had the Phoenix series. I think that's my no doubt about it, number 1. Some people might find this controversial. I got Herb Jones number 2 on the all-time small forward list for the Pelicans. First team all defense. The scoring numbers aren't amazing, but if among all the people who are watching this podcast, I know you guys are watching Herb Jones. And if you're watching Herb Jones consistently, you know what type of impact that dude has on the game. So I have no issue at all putting him at number 2. At number 3, I've got Peja Stojakovic. If you look at his numbers, he really only had like 2 good seasons in New Orleans.
He was just not himself. Like, I remember when I first started covering team, the biggest thing was like, can we trade his expiring for Melo or something along those lines? Which the answer was no.
Went to a Pelicans media day back in the day, and I joked with somebody that they should change the back of his jersey to Stojakovic's expiring contract.
Yeah.
That's the point it got to. When his back was bad, but when he was good, he was really good, and his best season was the best team in franchise history. When they won 56 games, CP was second in MVP voting, and he was a huge part of that. So you got to give him some credit for that. And this is where it gets controversial. I got Etuan Moore number 4. The
4, okay.
Small forward in franchise history. This dude was like, he came here he wasn't supposed to be the 3 when he came to New Orleans.
He's 6'3". Like, of course not.
Yeah, not even close. And like, just the consistency he provided. You knew exactly what was going to happen when he came off of that pin down and shot that right hand floater. You knew exactly what was going to happen when you kicked it to him in the corner. He was just consistent in his role. You knew what he was going to provide, and he played an important role on some good Pelicans teams. Like, we talk about some of the best teams in franchise history. That team that swept Portland in the first round, Etuan Moore played a huge role on that team. I got him 4, and I got Trey Murphy number 5 on my all-time.
Oh, wow, okay.
Pelicans. I know some people there's a lot of Trey fans out there who are going to be very upset about that, which is fine. It's cool. But Trey Murphy, I mean, if you look at the numbers, I was also surprised by this. Trey Murphy has like 100 more 3-pointers than Etuan in New Orleans already, which is wild.
You really did your research on this.
I was very passionate about this subject right here. I was ready to come in and talk all-time small forwards for the Pelicans. But I think Trey Murphy, really good. Of course, has the potential to maybe jump up to like 2-3 on this list. Maybe even 1. Who knows? But I do think as of right now, I give Etuan the slight edge just because I'm the captain of the Etuan fan club. I'll take that charge. I'm cool with it. You know, meet me on Wednesdays at the Etuan fan club meetings. It's like 4 of us in there, but it's going.
Yeah, y'all have matching jackets too, I believe, right?
Absolutely.
Do you think he could play for this team right now? Like, he would get minutes if he signed and could play, right? Like, immediately. He'd be starting. That's what the Pelicans do.
Man, and they need somebody who can knock down some jumpers for sure. I was looking at Antonio Daniels the other day. I'm like, listen, man, they might need like 10 minutes just to have somebody who can dribble a ball across half court. That was a struggle in a couple games. Just have somebody who can deal with the press. That was rough. At least like Alfred Payton is here to save the day now, who hasn't played the league in 2 years. At least I know he can like dribble the ball across half court, which is like asking a lot for Pelicans guards lately.
He looked good the other night. 8 assists, right? No, hasn't played for 2 years, pops in and is like, yeah, I know what my job is and did it well.
And that's the thing when you say about Alfred Payton, there are certain limitations to his game, but he knows exactly who he is. And he knows exactly how to make an impact on the game. And I think that's what you want when there's like a skeleton crew out there. Just put a dude out there who's a real professional, knows how to get the ball to his guys, knows how to run sets, make the passes in the right ways. Like that little stuff we kind of underestimate when we're looking at like dudes who are making $20 million every night. It's like, can you actually run a set? Do you know where to stand? Do you know when to make the pass? Just that little stuff, and just seeing him in that Cavs game, it was like, man, it's a big difference versus what we were seeing in the previous couple games.
You just saw that immediately in that first quarter, that lob to Yves Missi, and it was like, oh yeah, if you get someone that can do that, like they can do some stuff here for you. So I'm going to be curious to see what his role looks like going forward. And well, we got a game tonight since we're recording this on Thursday for Friday, so he's going to get some run and he's going to be starting again. So
the crazy thing with Alfred is like he's been around the team since training camp, so like, he's been waiting a long time for this opportunity. He was going through some injuries along the way. That's kind of what stopped them from adding him to the roster earlier. But like, yeah, I'm just really excited for Alfred to get this opportunity. A New Orleans guy. His freshman year high school was at Brother Martin. Shout out to the Saders. I always tell him I claim him on the best Brother Martin basketball players of all time list. So yeah, I'm just happy to see him get opportunity. It's a great story, and like I said, it's just good to have some type of good vibes going because it's a lot of bad
something
vibes
fun
in this world right now. So
just something fun. I'm with you here. All right, final thing I got for you before we get you out of here, and that's real or fake. Antonio Reeves should be in the rotation going forward. Like when everyone's healthy. Like he's obviously in the rotation tonight because who else is playing?
See, I answered a question similar to this, but it was about Brandon Boston in my most recent mailbag. And I think when I actually like laid out all of the guys, it was kind of difficult for me to get to Brandon Boston there. So I think if you want to talk Brandon Boston and Reeves, I think that might be a little tough because if you're looking at the starting five, if you're excluding Zion and Jose and everybody else is healthy, right? So you go DeJounte at the one, CJ, Herb, BI, Yves Missi as your starting five, right? And then you got Trey Murphy coming off the bench, of course. You need a backup five. So if you want to say JRE is that guy, or you want to keep doing Trey Jameson, whatever, you need a backup five. So that's 7. I would assume a Javonte Green is in the mix. You want one more defensive guy, or Brandon Boston. So I would say that's your 8, maybe 9. And at that point, Jordan Hawkins, of course, is another guy coming off the bench.
He's in there.
One more spot. So now you're looking at maybe 9, 10 guys already, and that's before you get to Antonio Reeves. So I think it was good to see him explode in that Cleveland game the way he did. I think his confidence is much better. There was definitely a point early in the preseason when I was like, this might be a rough pick. But I think you've seen him progress over time, get more comfortable where his shots are coming. But I do think once Hawk is back, I think your bench is pretty much set, especially if you're like saying Brandon Boston is going to be in the rotation, no doubt. Playing Hawk plus Brandon Boston, I think that's your 2 backup guards coming off the bench.
Yeah, in general, I agree, but it's going to be nice to see him at least get some run until they're fully healthy, and he'll have a role right now, maybe get some good development in that where he wouldn't get it otherwise. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans here with Will Guillory on Friday. Pelicans taking on the Golden State Warriors. Hopefully they can get a win, but we definitely know people are coming back soon, and that's an important thing. So I appreciate everyone for listening. Will, I appreciate you being on here with me.
If y'all want to hear 6 through 10 on my small forwards list, just hit me up on Twitter.
There we go.
Got 6 through 10. I'm working on 11 through 15. We can get into like Solomon Hill and Wesley Johnson, some of those guys. Ooh. If you want to talk to small forward, Luke.
Wesley Johnson's cool. That's cool.
So yeah, I'm gonna keep building this list out throughout the course of the season, and maybe I'll come back and we can keep going.
All right. No, we're gonna make you like basically rank like every player in franchise history in like some order. There should be a category alone for guys they signed and then started the night of, they signed them in the morning, then started them that night. There's literally like a 10 to 12 person list there. You can make a whole team based on that.
Absolutely. That's a fire list right there.
That's kind of a fun one. All right. We'll have some fun with this in the future. I appreciate Will coming on here with me. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, this week of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all on Monday.